The farmer is shocked to see a disabled beggar say that her child will return. Jonathan Calloway strode through the park with the chill of autumn biting at his skin, leaves crunching under his polished shoes. The crisp air was filled with the scent of damp earth, but all he could think about were profit margins and upcoming board meetings. His life was neatly ordered, each moment measured and calculated, until he turned a corner and found himself face to face with an unsettling sight. A frail girl sitting on a worn blanket, her eyes bright with fierce determination. She clutched a tattered stuffed animal, its one button eye glaring defiantly at the world. "My father will return," she announced, piercing through his thoughts like an arrow. The statement hung in the air, almost magical, weaving through the rustling leaves. Jonathan blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Really?" he scoffed under his breath before stepping away, irritation bubbling within him. Who was she? Was it curiosity? Was it guilt? Dismissing the girl felt right, yet there was something about her unwavering faith that unsettled him. Like a forgotten ghost from his past, rising to the surface. That evening, the world outside came crashing into his carefully built fortress of solitude. Jonathan slumped in his huge leather chair, reviewing plans for a new development project, but his mind kept drifting. Helen. The name buzzed around his head like a swarm of angry bees. She was the one who left, taking with her laughter and love, leaving behind a collection of dusty memories trapped in black and white photographs. Every unfulfilled promise echoed in his heart. The next morning, he woke with Sophie's words heavy on him, creating a crack in his cold exterior. Were they true? Did he have a daughter he hadn't known? The thought was absurd, yet it pulled at him, a flicker of warmth in an otherwise dark reality. Days passed, and just as he began to forget the girl, like a storm came. She stood in front of him, fierce and beautiful as ever, her eyes filled with a storm of emotions. "You can't ignore this anymore. Sophie needs protection," she hurled at him. Jonathan's chest tightened. Protection? From what? As the courtroom drama unfolded, he found himself sitting on the edge of his seat. Sophie stood before the judge, defiantly declaring, "My father is a good man!" He couldn't breathe. Doubts crowded his mind. Was she really his child? Was this all a twisted game? Just then he recognized a flicker of something in her eyes. Was it hope? Or was it an illusion? Every revelation clawed at him, dragging him deeper into memories he'd buried for years. His empire of power and profit seemed to fade in the background as the question loomed large. Who was he? The truth was out there, hidden in the shadows between Sophie and the ghost of Helen. Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without notice. Just give that red button down below a quick check to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content coming your way. And while you're at it, leave a powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes each bold word echoed in the cavernous room. The judge's gavel fell, and silence blanketed the space like a heavy fog. He could feel everyone watching. The whispers, the judgment, the unspoken expectations. It was crushing. Was he really a good man? Were Helen and Sophie right? This was a moment he could not escape, a weight pressing down on him. Just as he was about to get up and walk out, an unfamiliar voice rang out, cold and commanding. "Jonathan Calloway!" A voice sliced through the tension. It was a woman standing in the doorway, tall and imposing, with fierce, dishevelled hair and eyes that burned like two coals. "I'm here for Sophie!" Shock rippled through the room. Who was this woman? A wave of confusion washed over Jonathan as the judge raised an eyebrow, uncertain. "And you are?" "I'm her mother," the woman stated firmly, her voice trembling with emotion. Gasps filled the courtroom. Jonathan's heart raced. He exchanged a glance with Helen, whose expression quickly turned from confusion to anger. Helen's eyes flared. "What do you mean? You can't just claim her!" The accusation hung thick in the air. The woman stepped forward, locking eyes with Sophie. "You don't even know your real name, do you?" she pressed, her gaze unrelenting. Sophie froze. The certainty she had held in her gaze started to waver. Jonathan's world began to tilt. "Real name?" Confusion morphed into something deeper. Fear. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice barely above a whisper. Panic rising in his chest. The woman's jaw set defiantly, and she took a deep breath. "Sophie doesn't belong to you. You've been living a lie." The word lie dropped like a stone, sending ripples through the assembled crowd. The hallway echoed with hushed murmurs, an impending storm gathering strength. "I had her taken from you," the woman continued, her voice piercing through Jonathan's defenses like shards of glass. "She belongs with me. I know everything." Jonathan felt the weight of 1,000 questions crash down around him. He had never seen this woman, nor heard any whispers of another mother. Meanwhile, Sophie stood in the centre, eyes darting between her father and this stranger. "Mom?" Her voice trembled, barely a whisper. Jonathan felt the air leave his lungs as he looked at Sophie, his heart pounding in his chest. In that split second, something primal took hold. Rage clawed at him. "Who are you to come here?" "To tear apart what little family I thought I had?" He stepped closer, fists clenched, fighting against the turmoil that wanted to consume him. "I am the one who had to live with the truth," she shouted, the intensity in her voice cracking walls of silence. "You are not who you think you are, Jonathan." Those words hung over them, black clouds suffocating the light. The courtroom held its breath, waiting. Who was he really? Who was she? As the revelations simmered in the air, Jonathan's resolve began to crumble. He looked from Sophie to Helen, to the woman who claimed to be her mother, and back to Sophie, who now bore the weight of uncertainty. The very fabric of their reality was unraveling, thread by thread. In that moment, everything began to shift. The truth was like a jagged edge, threatening to slice through the fragile connections they had. And beneath it all, the question lingered dangerously. What if he was not even her father? The words hung heavy in the air, as if the entire courtroom had taken a collective breath. Jonathan's chest tightened. Who was this woman? His gut churned with dread, and his mind raced. A mother? But how? Sophie's eyes flicked between the two women, confusion spreading across her face. Mom? She whispered again, her voice breaking. A part of Jonathan wanted to reach out to her, soothe her, tell her it would be okay. But another part felt the walls closing in, crushing him under the weight of this revelation. Stop! He shouted suddenly, the word tearing from his throat like an animal caught in a trap. You don't know what you're talking about. I know everything! The stranger shot back, her voice fierce. I've been fighting for years. Sophie was taken from me, and I finally found her. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Jonathan's eyes darted from his daughter to Helen, to this mysterious woman who claims such a profound, painful truth. With every second, a thick tension crackled like static electricity. What does that mean? Helen interrupted, her face pale. What are you saying? None of this makes sense. But the woman took a step forward, her fierce gaze locking onto Sophie's. You were stolen. You were meant to be with your real mother. At that moment, a loud, clattering noise broke through the tension like shattering glass. An officer burst into the room, breathing heavily. Excuse me, he said, his voice sharp. We have an emergency. We need everyone to clear the area. Panic flared. Footsteps echoed. Stay where you are! Another voice shouted. But chaos erupted. People stood, shoving chairs aside, looking everywhere as Jonathan's heart raced. Mum, what's happening? Sophie cried, retreating closer to Jonathan. Stay with me, he managed to say, his voice strained. The officer stepped closer, urgency flashing in his eyes. There's been a bomb threat. We need to evacuate! Now! The words hit like a thunderbolt, leaving everyone frozen for a split second before the room erupted into frantic movement. Jonathan reached for Sophie, pulling her close while the crowd surged, trying to escape the building. But then the woman who claimed to be Sophie's mother, turned, her face paling. No, I can't leave her, she cried, her voice lost within the chaos. Jonathan's instincts kicked in. You're not taking her, he shouted, stepping protectively in front of Sophie. But as the panic grew, the officer yelled above the din. We need to go! Now! The room pulsed with fear, and Sophie looked up at Jonathan, her eyes wide and searching. Dad? Before he could respond, a loud ringing filled the air, slicing through the chaos. Everything seemed to freeze. In the chaos, the stranger reached for Sophie, desperation spilling from her. You have to trust me. I'm your real... Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the ground, rattling the walls. Windows shattered, raining glass like deadly rain, scattering screams in every direction. Jonathan felt the force of it hit him, knocking him off balance. Sophie stumbled, reaching for him as debris tumbled. Stay close, he shouted, instinctively wrapping his arms around her. As the dust settled, the realization burned into Jonathan's mind. In that moment, as he held Sophie tight, uncertainty twisted in him like a knife. A truth felt like smoke, terrifying but ephemeral. What had just happened? Who was this woman truly? The floor beneath them shook again, but as he looked around, one thing was clear. Everything had just changed. And with echoes of confusion and fear ringing in his ears, one deep question lingered. What if this explosion unraveled everything he thought he knew? Everything he thought he wanted? Jonathan tightened his grip on Sophie, her small frame shaking against him as panic roiled in the air. The chaos of the courtroom swirled like a storm, debris raining down, screams echoing in painful waves. "Stay close!" he shouted again, scanning the room for the woman who claimed to be Sophie's mother. But she was lost in the throng, faces twisted with fear and confusion. He pushed forward, weaving through the crowd. "We have to get out!" His voice barely broke through the noise. Sophie's wide eyes stared up at him, searching for reassurance. He wished he could give it to her, but his heart pounded with uncertainty. Another blast reverberated through the building, a deeper rumble, more profound than just sound. It shook the walls like an angry beast. Dust cascaded down from the ceiling, blinding them momentarily. Jonathan felt a surge of adrenaline. He yanked Sophie closer, urging her, "Run!" Then a flash of movement caught his eye. The woman, her fierce gaze locked onto him amidst the madness. "You don't know the truth!" she cried, her voice piercing through the chaos. "What truth?" he barked back, confusion ripping through him. She took a step forward, but just then a loud crack split the air. A heavy beam came crashing down, pinning her to the ground. Jonathan's heart sank. "No!" he shouted, instinctively moving towards her. But Sophie clutched at his arm, fear written across her face. "Dad, don't, please!" He hesitated for a moment, torn between instinct and the pull of fear. The room began to shake violently, as if the earth itself was splitting apart. And then it happened. The world tilted. The very ground beneath them roared as the ceiling caved in. A bright flash blinded him for an instant, the ground rippling like ocean waves. He shielded Sophie as the dust thickened around them, choking and disorienting. Suddenly, a low rumble transformed into an ear-splitting explosion. Glass shattered like raindrops of death as it echoed in his chest. Jonathan cried out, instinctively pushing Sophie down. The world erupted into chaos around them. But through the cacophony, a voice floated above the noise, a voice that chilled Jonathan to his core. "Jonathan, you never knew." He looked up. The woman pinned beneath the beam, her eyes shimmering with a strange mix of pain and knowing. "You're not just her father," she gasped. "You're the reason she was taken." Sophie's head whipped towards him, sheer shock cracking open the vulnerability in her expression. "What does she mean?" Jonathan's mind raced, confusion kaleidoscoping around. "I don't know. I can't." "Your life, your choices, it all led to this," the woman strained, barely holding on to consciousness. "You were supposed to protect her." It was a sentiment that pierced through the fog in Jonathan's mind. A gut-wrenching recognition that his past action, the fabric of his carefully constructed life, began to tear. Sophie's face turned pale as the weight of her mother's words sank in, her eyes darting back and forth between Jonathan and the woman beneath the beam. "Dad, is that true? Were you supposed to protect me?" The chaos around them dulled for a moment. A sudden stillness that felt as if time had stopped. Jonathan felt a cold sweat trailing down his back. Dread filled his veins. "I never knew," he whispered, but it felt hollow. Everything he thought he knew began to unravel. Conflicting truths twisted together with raw emotions, and the notion that he might have failed Sophie before she was ever born settled heavily on his chest. Through the haze, the room trembled again. Dust still hung thick, but the weight of his world collapsed like the walls around them. "Get out!" The order came from somewhere distant, but Jonathan's mind was spinning. Unbeknownst to him, the very foundation of their fates was shifting. "Dad?" Sophie's voice broke him, pulling him back into their reality. And the questions, the doubts, wrapped around him like a vice. Was he really the man he thought he was? What had been taken from them long before this moment? And just as they began to process the enormity of the moment, another explosion rocked the building. As dust fell like snow around them, they were left with one undeniable thought. The truth was more explosive than he ever imagined. Would they survive to face it together? Jonathan tightened his grip on Sophie, the chaos around them blurring into a whirlwind of noise and fear. Her eyes, wide and vulnerable, searched his. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice trembling against the rumble of destruction. He could feel the weight of uncertainty crushing down around them. But he had to stay strong for her. "Stay close!" he shouted again, as another blast reverberated through the walls, shaking everything to its core. The woman, pinned under the debris, screamed, her voice a raw mixture of pain and desperation. "Get out of here!" The command came from somewhere outside of Jonathan's recognition. He scanned the room, caught in a vortex of thoughts and emotions. The weight of the woman's revelation pressed heavily on his chest. Was he really the man he thought he was? He felt the heat of panic rising. His eyes darted to Sophie, and he pulled her closer. "We have to go!" Then something shifted. A loud, creaking sound sliced through the chaos. The ceiling began to bow ominously. "Now!" he screamed, shoving Sophie toward the exit as dust poured like rain. They stumbled forward, pushing through the masses that surged towards safety. But just as they reached the doorway, Jonathan caught sight of the woman, still trapped, her gaze locking onto his with a fierceness that made his heart race. "You need to know the truth!" she cried, her voice breaking through the town's echoing chaos, grasping at the threads of Jonathan's sanity. But before he could reply, another deafening explosion erupted from the heart of the building. Time slowed as everything turned to chaos around them. Walls cracked. Debris flew through the air, and Jonathan felt Sophie yank away. Terror etched on her face. "No!" he lunged, reaching out to her. But then a thunderous crash came from above. and a section of the ceiling collapsed in a torrent of dust and concrete. In that moment, Jonathan's world splintered. Amidst the chaos, he caught a flicker of movement from the corner of his eye. A figure stumbling out of the dust. It was Helen. Fresh panic washed over. "What are you doing?" he shouted, his heart slamming against his ribs. "She shouldn't be here." Then everything froze. Helen's eyes shifted, locking on the woman beneath the beam. "You!" she breathed, recognition lighting her expression with horror. The woman gasped as she finally managed to dig herself out, collapsing onto the floor. "You didn't tell him! You didn't tell him the truth!" The words felt like daggers. Jonathan's heart raced faster. What truth? His mind scrambled to piece it together as the woman struggled to her knees. "Stop!" Jonathan shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "What are you talking about?" But Helen stepped closer, her face pale as she glanced nervously between the woman and Sophie. "You're lying! You don't know what you're saying!" Sophie looked between her parents, confusion storming in her eyes. "Mum, what's going on?" The woman inhaled sharply, bracing herself. "Jonathan, you are not the father. You never were." The words struck like thunder. A stillness blanketed the chaos swirling around them. "What?" he choked out, feeling the ground shift under his feet. "Your DNA isn't in her," she gasped. "I swear." "I know, because I'm her true mother." A collective gasp swept through the crowd. The people around them frozen in place, eyes wide with disbelief. Sophie's face went blank, eyes searching Jonathan's, still trying to find trust in the storm of confusion. Through the shock, a flicker of memory ignited in Jonathan's mind. The late-night conversations, the whispers of secrets he had tried to bury deep, but he'd never known. Before he could grasp at the truth, another explosion rang out, shaking the building to its core. "Ground Zero! Move!" he yelled, panic making him impulsive. But as they lunged forward, towards the exit, Sophie stumbled, her face twisting in pain. "Mom!" she screamed, darting back towards Helen. Jonathan grabbed her arm. "No!" But as she reached for Helen, the woman who had just revealed this shattering truth unleashed a scream that pierced the atmosphere. "Stop! You can't go near her!" Jonathan's heart raced in terror. Who was lying? Suddenly, everything cracked wide open. What if he had been wrong all along? What if Sophie had never been his? Amidst the debris and chaos, one ugly truth stood stark among the cries for help. Every certainty he had was collapsing, just like the world around them. And as they stumbled toward the darkness, a question lingered in the air, thick as the dust swirling around them. Who was the real enemy? Would they escape this nightmare before discovering the horrifying truth? Jonathan felt the ground tremble beneath them, but he couldn't focus on that now. The truth hung heavy in the air, tightening around his throat. "You're lying!" he yelled back at the woman, desperation clawing at him as his heart raced. "Am I?" She shot back, her eyes glinting with fierce emotion. "You just have to think for a moment." Sophie, trembling, clung to Jonathan's arm, her face a mix of fear and confusion. "Dad, what's going on?" Her voice cracked, echoing their collective uncertainty. Then came a deafening boom, louder than before, rattling the very structure around them. Dust fell like teardrops. Panic filled the air. "We need to get out!" Jonathan yelled, his instincts kicking in, but the fray tightened its grip. "No, listen," the woman insisted, rising with effort, wincing as she struggled under the rubble. The urgency in her eyes held him captive. "You have to understand, this is bigger than you think." Then, with a sudden shift in the atmosphere, Sophie's eyes widened in horror, her breath hitching. "What do you mean? Who are you?" And just then, the chaos outside swelled, the screams mixing with another explosion. A jarring echo, this time different, a sound that vibrated through Jonathan's bones. Out of instinct, he turned his head, the energy of the crowd shifting toward the sound. With a sinister rush, a group of armed figures burst into the room, faces hidden behind black masks. One raised a weapon, and Jonathan's heart stopped. "Everyone down!" The command thundered through the air. Panic ensued. People screamed, scattering like leaves in a storm, each individual desperate to escape. The masked figures moved quickly, precision in their chaos. Jonathan turned to Sophie, shielding her with his body, praying for safety. "Stay close!" he urged, his grip tightening on her hand. But the chaos drowned out everything else. Then, like a spark igniting gasoline, one of the masked figures shouted something, a word that twisted Jonathan's stomach. "Project Ghost." The air grew thick with realization. What does that mean?" he stammered, the fear coiling tighter. The woman fell back, eyes widening. "No, they can't!" But before she could finish, a figure stepped forward, unmasked, revealing an all too familiar face. Jonathan's heart plummeted. "Helen?" He barely whispered, but the words hitched in his throat. Her eyes, once dark with anger and pain, now radiated something else. A steely resolve tinged with sorrow. "Jonathan, it's not what you think." Shock coursed through him. "What do you mean? You were supposed to be—" "Listen!" Helen interrupted, urgency steeped in every syllable. "They're after her. After both of you. It's all tied to what I didn't tell you." Panic rallied around them, the tension bubbling like a pot about to boil over. The masked figures roamed closer, weapons trained on the crowd. A voice cut through the confusion again, commanding and sharp. "Helen, you shouldn't have come here." "What are you doing?" Helen spat back, stepping forward as if she could shield them from the storm. "She's my daughter." The words dropped like stones, every gaze pivoting towards Sophie. Suddenly, everything shifted. The room erupted into chaos as the masked figures unleashed a storm of commands. Another explosion rocking the building. Jonathan's mind spun, the fragments of his world shifting again. The truth, once a slumbering beast, roared to life within him. Did Helen know what this Project Ghost was about? Did he truly not know Sophie at all? In that moment, a realization crashed over Jonathan. "You're saying this is why I've been pulled into this?" "Yes!" Helen cried, voice trembling with urgency. "We're all connected, trapped in something deeper." A sudden thought hit him like ice water. What if the truth about Sophie was even darker than he could comprehend? And without warning, the masked figures began waving the weapons again. "Get down! Now!" Jonathan felt that sick twist again. What do they want? As they plunged deeper into the chaos, his heart hammered harder. The pieces of this horrible puzzle were scattered all around. Each fragment, Jonathan felt the ground tremble beneath them, but he couldn't focus on that now. The truth hung heavy in the air, tightening around his throat. "You're lying!" he yelled back at the woman, desperation clawing at him like sharp claws. "Am I?" she shot back, her eyes glinting with fierce emotion. "You just have to think for a moment." Sophie, trembling, clung to Jonathan's arm, her face a mix of fear and confusion. "Dad, what's going on?" Her voice cracked, echoing their collective uncertainty. Then came a deafening boom, louder than before, rattling the very structure around them. Dust fell like teardrops. Panic filled the air. "We need to get out!" Jonathan yelled, his instincts kicking in, but the fray tightened its grip. "No, listen!" the woman insisted, rising with effort, wincing as she struggled under the rubble. The urgency in her eyes held him captive. "You have to understand. This is bigger than you think." Then, with a sudden shift in the atmosphere, Sophie's eyes widened in horror, her breath hitching. "What do you mean? Who are you?" And just then, the chaos outside swelled, the screams mixing with another explosion, a jarring echo, this time different, a sound that vibrated through Jonathan's bones. Out of instinct, he turned his head, the energy of the crowd shifting toward the sound. With a sinister rush, a group of armed figures burst into the room, faces hidden behind black masks. One raised a weapon, and Jonathan's heart stopped. "Everyone down!" The command thundered through the air. Panic ensued. People screamed, scattering like leaves in a storm, each individual desperate to escape. The masked figures moved quickly, precision in their chaos. Jonathan turned to Sophie, shielding her with his body, praying for safety. "Stay close," he urged, his grip tightening on her hand. But the chaos drowned out everything else. Then, like a spark igniting gasoline, one of the masked figures shouted something, a word that twisted Jonathan's stomach. "Project Ghost!" The air grew thick with realization. What does that mean?" he stammered, the fear coiling tighter. The woman fell back, eyes widening. "No, they can't!" But before she could finish, a figure stepped forward, unmasked, revealing an all too familiar face. Jonathan's heart plummeted. "Helen?" he barely whispered, but the words hitched in his throat. Her eyes, once dark with anger and pain, now radiated something else, a steely resolve, tinged with sorrow. "Jonathan, it's not what you think." Shock coursed through him. "What do you mean? You were supposed to be—" "Listen," Helen interrupted, urgency steeped in every syllable. "They're after her. After both of you. It's all tied to what I didn't tell you." Panic rallied around them, the tension bubbling like a pot about to boil over. The masked figures roamed closer, weapons trained on the crowd. A voice cut through the confusion again, commanding and sharp. "Helen, you shouldn't have come here." "What are you doing?" Helen spat back, stepping forward as if she could shield them from the storm. "She's my daughter!" The words dropped like stones, every gaze pivoting towards Sophie. Suddenly, everything shifted. The room erupted into chaos as the masked figures unleashed a storm of commands. Another explosion rocking the building. Jonathan's mind spun, the fragments of his world shifting again. Then, With a bone-chilling realization, Jonathan grasped the truth. You're not her mother! A shriek filed the air, almost drowning out a new voice. I am! From the shadows swept a girl, face smeared with dust and dirt. She couldn't have been older than Sophie. Jonathan's breath caught as he registered the intensity in her eyes. Eyes that mirrored Sophie's exactly. I'm her twin! The world fell silent. Sophie's jaw went slack. Jonathan staggered back, the shock breaking over him like a wave. Twin he never knew existed. Helen's face was a picture of horror. No, this can't be. The girl stepped forward, defiant. You took her from me. Jonathan's heart raced, the pieces of his reality scattering like leaves in the wind. Sophie turned to him, eyes wide with confusion and fear. What does that mean? And all around them gasps echoed, shock rippling through the crowd, as the chaos pulsed like a living thing. No one spoke. No one moved. In that moment, revelation shattered everything. A world he thought he understood crumbled as Jonathan blinked in disbelief. A daughter? A lost daughter? Was everything they built a lie? As fear gripped him, the masked figures started closing in, weapons raised. Jonathan's heart raced with dread. The truth was so much bigger than he could comprehend, and everything was about to change. And as he looked between the two girls, two daughters carved from the same flesh, one question screamed in his mind. Who do I really protect? The air was thick with confusion and fear. Every eye locked on the girl who claimed to be Sophie's twin. I'm her twin, she had shouted. But the world felt like it was swirling too fast for Jonathan to grasp it all. Panic consumed the courtroom. The masked figures closing in, weapons raised, tension electric. Who do I really protect? That thought hung heavy, and just when Jonathan thought the chaos couldn't get worse, the unthinkable happened. From the shadows, another figure stepped forward. An older man, unkempt and wild-eyed, burst into the chaos, and he had a look that sent chills down Jonathan's spine. Stop! Everyone just stop! He yelled, the authority in his voice cutting through the panic. Who are you? Jonathan managed to spit out, confusion boiling inside him. Was there even more to this nightmare? I'm the one you're all looking for, the man shouted, collapsing forward, but keeping his gaze intense. Sophie, listen to me! You're in danger! It's not safe here! Sophie's head ripped around, uncertainty blooming in her eyes. Danger? From who? Before the man could answer, the room shook again, more violent than before, and then came a blinding flash. An explosion erupted behind the masked figures. Dust and debris rained down, causing screams to erupt. Jonathan instinctively ducked, pulling Sophie under him, shielding her as best as he could. When the dust settled, the man was gone, vanished as if swallowed by the chaos. But what he left behind was worse. The girl who claimed to be Sophie's twin. She was now on the floor, a deep crimson stain spreading across her shirt, eyes wide and terrified. No! Jonathan screamed, his heart racing. He had only seen such a sight on screens, never wanting it to touch his life. The crowd erupted, a wave of horror washing over them. The masked figures froze, caught off guard by the sudden turn of events. One of them turned, the previous controls slipping from their grasp. Get medics in here! They shouted, their voices now laced with panic. Sophie's breath quickened. taking in the scene, the chaos, the frantic energy. What is happening? Who is she? Tears streamed down her face. The confusion, the pain, the betrayal all clawed at her. And then Jonathan felt it snap. A freezing realization. The twin. She wasn't just another girl. She was part of a hidden truth that tied back to his own life. No, it can't be, he whispered, the revelation twisting his stomach. They were twins. But that means... Sophie, he turned to her, desperate. Do you know who the man was? What he meant? I don't know, she cried, her voice cracking with anguish. What does this all mean? Why would anyone want to hurt us? But as he held her close, Jonathan pressed his eyes shut, grappling with dark thoughts. The truth so palpable and yet so terrifying. Suddenly, another masked figure rushed forward, eyes blazing with emotion. Catch her! And with that command, he reached down, grabbing the unconscious girl, ready to leap. Stop! Jonathan screamed, panic seizing him again. Go take her! But the masked figure hurried away, leaving turmoil in their wake. Sophie's wails filled the room, strong and piercing, drowning out everything else. And as Jonathan held her tightly, fear wrapping around them both, the weight of secrets and danger pressed heavy in the air. The ground shook again, not from explosions, but from the realization that whatever was happening, it was just the tip of an iceberg. The courtroom was engulfed in confusion. But amid the chaos, one haunting question lingered. What if this was all just the beginning? The air was thick with confusion and fear. Every eye locked on the girl who claimed to be Sophie's twin. I'm her twin, she had shouted, but the world felt like it was swirling too fast for Jonathan to grasp it all. Panic consumed the courtroom, the masked figures closing in, weapons raised, tension electric. Who do I really protect? That thought hung heavy. And just when Jonathan thought the chaos couldn't get worse, an older man, unkempt and wild-eyed, burst into the chaos, and he had a look that sent chills down Jonathan's spine. Stop! Everyone just stop! He yelled, the authority in his voice cutting through the panic. Who are you? Jonathan managed to spit out, confusion boiling inside him. Was there even more to this nightmare? I'm the one you're all looking for! The man collapsed forward, but kept his gaze intense. Sophie, listen to me. You're in danger. It's not safe here. Sophie's head whipped around, uncertainty blooming in her eyes. Danger? From who? Before the man could answer, the room shook again, more violently than before. And then came a blinding flash. An explosion erupted behind the masked figures. Dust and debris rained down, causing screams to erupt. Jonathan instinctively ducked, pulling Sophie under him, shielding her as best as he could. When the dust settled, the man was gone, vanished as if swallowed by the chaos. But what he left behind was worse. The girl who claimed to be Sophie's twin. She was now on the floor, a deep crimson stain spreading across her shirt, eyes wide and terrified. No! Jonathan screamed, his heart racing. He had only seen such a sight on screens, never wanting it to touch his life. The crowd erupted, a wave of horror washing over them. The masked figures froze, caught off guard by the sudden turn of events. One of them turned, the previous controls slipping from their grasp. Get medics in here, they shouted, their voices now laced with panic. Sophie's breath quickened, taking in the scene, the chaos, the frantic energy. What is happening? Who is she? Tears streamed down her face, confusion and heartbreak mixing. And then Jonathan felt it snap, a freezing realization. The twin! She wasn't just another girl. She was part of a hidden truth that tied back to his own life. No! No! It can't be, he whispered, the revelation twisting his stomach. They were twins, but that means... Sophie! He turned to her, desperate. Do you know who the man was? What he meant? I don't know, she cried, her voice cracking with anguish. What does this all mean? Why would anyone want to hurt us? But as he held her close, Jonathan pressed his eyes shut, grappling with dark thoughts, the truth so palpable and yet so terrifying. Suddenly, another masked figure rushed forward, eyes blazing with emotion. Catch her! And with that command, he reached down, grabbing the unconscious girl, ready to leap. Stop! Jonathan screamed, panic seizing him again. Don't take her! But the masked figure hurried away, leaving turmoil in their wake. Sophie wailed, her heart tearing apart. No! Don't let her go! Dad! She cried, despair painting her face. And then something completely unexpected happened. The girl, the unconscious one, suddenly gasped for breath. Her eyes shot open, but they weren't the same anymore. They glowed with an otherworldly light, as if something inside her stirred. An energy so intense it made the room feel electric. The panic momentarily froze, as everyone stared in disbelief. Stop looking at me! She shrieked suddenly, her voice echoing unnaturally, reverberating against the walls. I am not what you think! Jonathan's heart raced. Every instinct warned him to back away. He felt the ground shift beneath him, as if the very foundations were cracking under the weight of this new truth. Helen, what's happening? He yelled, looking for the only person who might understand. But she was gone, lost in the frenzy. The girl slowly stood, eyes darting to Sophie, then to Jonathan. You don't understand! I was sent to protect you both. Half of me protected by my twin. Half of me here to unearth the truth. The room collectively gasped. Confusion and fear mingled with a sudden pulse of hope. Every secret felt ignited, ready to explode as Jonathan struggled to grasp what was unfolding. Protect us? From what? Sophie stepped back, barely able to process the chaos. I'm you, but I'm not. I'm part of something bigger. You're all in danger. Suddenly, the lights flickered and then went out, plunging the courtroom into darkness. As panic erupted again, Jonathan felt the strange energy ripple through the space, an undercurrent pulling at his very core. Before he could react, another voice blared through the dark. You're all part of the project. It was never just Sophie. It was always about you too, Jonathan. A spotlight flickered to life, casting sharp shadows and revealing figures in lab coats, watching with cold, calculating eyes. The sudden revelation hit Jonathan like a punch to the gut. Project? He gasped, heart pounding in his chest. In that moment, doubt and uncertainty churned. Everything he thought he knew was shattering. Protecting Sophie might mean understanding a truth more dangerous than he ever imagined. And as the tension crackled in the dark, one terrifying thought loomed large. What if Sophie wasn't the only one in danger? The room was chaos. All eyes locked on the girl who claimed to be Sophie's twin. "I'm her twin!" she shouted again, and Jonathan felt the walls closing in. Panic washed over the crowd, the masked figures inching closer, weapons glinting in the flickering light. Who do I really protect? The question hung like a heavy fog in Jonathan's mind. Just when he thought it couldn't get worse, another figure burst into the tumult. A weathered-looking man with wild hair. The kind of man you'd see in old photographs. Eyes blazing with urgency. "Everyone, just stop!" he yelled, voice slicing through the din. "Listen to me! You're all in danger!" His words hit like a freight train. Jonathan felt a tremor go through Sophie beside him, confusion mixing with terror. "Who are you?" Jonathan demanded, adrenaline spikes sending his heart racing. "I'm the one you seek," the man gasped, barely able to hold himself up. "Sophie, you need to understand, this is bigger than any of us." His words electrified the atmosphere. Sophie's expression shifted from despair to determination. "What do you know?" Before he could answer, the room shuddered violently. A deafening boom! Jonathan instinctively pulled Sophie close, shielding her as dust rained down from the ceiling, masking their vision. The chaos erupted again, and when the dust cleared, she was gone. The girl who claimed to be the twin. Jonathan's heart dropped as he realized she had slipped away amid the confusion, leaving a haunting silence in her wake. "Where is she?" Sophie cried, panic surging through her veins. "Dad?" "We need to find her," Jonathan replied, urgency pulsing in his chest. He glanced around, trying to make sense of everything, every face filled with shock, every whisper deepening the chaos. "Your life, it's all part of Project Ghost," the older man shouted urgently, cutting through the noise. "They've been watching you. The hidden truth is in both of you." Sophie seemed frozen, absorbing the weight of his words. "Project Ghost?" she repeated, as if tasting the horrid reality for the first time. Then, before anything else could be said, the doors burst open, and armed figures stormed in, weapons drawn. Panic erupted anew as shadows flitted across the walls, their commands ringing loud. "Get down! Move!" a voice roared, and Jonathan's instincts kicked in. He grabbed Sophie, pulling her towards the nearest exit. "Run!" They sprinted, pushing through the chaos. The crowd erupted in screams and confusion, but Jonathan's focus sharpened. He needed to protect Sophie at all costs. Just as they reached the side door, Jonathan felt a sharp pain. A bullet grazed his arm. He stumbled, but stayed on his feet. "Keep going!" he shouted, blood racing down his skin. Sophie turned back, her face etched with fear. "Dad!" she screamed. "I'm fine! Just go!" But just as she fled, he caught movement from the corner of his eye. The girl, the supposed twin, was struggling against an officer, beads of sweat drenching her brow. "Help me!" she cried. Jonathan's heart raced faster than his feet. "Sophie!" he yelled, turning sharply. "We can't leave her!" "No, Dad!" Sophie stood at the door, torn, eyes wide with despair. "We can't risk it. We need to protect ourselves." But the truth bore down on him like a weight. Did they really know who was in danger? "She's part of this family," he shouted back. his blood pumping, a mix of rage and fear fueling him. Sophie gripped his arm, her fingers cold and trembling. But what if she's a part of the lie? At that moment, every question they ever faced crashed into them. They stood on the precipice of a chilling truth that threatened to unravel their lives. Jonathan looked back, battling his instincts. "Stay close!" In an unexpected turn, the girl shouted back, "You need to uncover the secrets! They're tied to all of us! Together we can break free!" Before Jonathan could respond, another explosion reverberated through the building. Dust engulfed them again, but in the haze, he caught a glimpse of the twin, disappearing into the shadows, the chaos swallowing her whole. Jonathan stumbled, clutching Sophie tightly. "We need to go! Now!" He turned to run when a strand of memories pierced through. Laughter, shadows of past truths, and screams of fear, all melding into one horrifying realization. As they burst through the exit into the light of day, they knew everything had changed, and this was only the beginning. Whatever Project Ghost meant, it was drawing them into a darker mystery than they could have ever imagined. But one undeniable truth now tied them together. The search for answers had just begun, and they had to navigate the unfolding storm. Hey! Before you go, this is the time to take action. You need to subscribe now to make sure you don't miss the next exclusive stories coming your way. Smash that like button to help us beat the algorithm. Drop your reactions and theories in the comments below. Let's hear what you think about this mind-blowing finale. And don't wait 1 second longer to share this with at least 5 friends who must know how this story ends. Your support